When considering an episode, an event, or a person that influenced the kind of teacher that I became, there's kind of one story that popped into my head just right off the bat. And this story takes place when I was a sophomore in high school, and I brought, for my show and tell, I brought my a yearbook, and there's the Dark Side of the Moon there, a Pink Floyd homage on our yearbook. But so my story takes place when I'm a sophomore. So I have a picture right here of me. There I am. Look at that little guy. I'm a sophomore at a very large public high school. I spent the first 8 years of my life at a Catholic grade school, and when I got to high school, it was a big public high school. It was enormous. It was about 2,400 students compared, or more actually, compared to the 23 students that I had in my 8th grade graduating class. So it was quite a culture shock, and I remember as a freshman being really kind of overwhelmed and a little bit scared a lot. I took my classes and I got on my bike and I rode home every day, tried to get home as soon as possible because I grew up in a family with 6 kids. We were all very close in age. I was number 3. And so I had very small amounts of time in my life where I was at home and I could just be by myself for a while. And that was one of them. So that part was really, really great for me, but it meant that I didn't really get involved, or I didn't choose to get involved much in any extracurriculars in high school. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know how to do that. I didn't really even understand that you could do that. So I started my sophomore year, not really looking forward to it. But I was recommended by my freshman English teacher to take the honors English class as a sophomore. And so I did that, and I remember really being struck on the first day of class how very serious those students were. And it turns out they had all been in honors English as freshmen, and they knew each other, and they were kind of a small group that was going through school together at this large high school. So I was already feeling a little bit intimidated and a little bit like an outsider as soon as the school year started. So one of the very first things we were asked to do as students in the class was to prepare a speech that we would give, 5-minute speech that would introduce ourselves to everybody else in the class. And I remember our teacher, Mrs. Wortman, she gave us a list of things that we needed to make sure we addressed, like where we were born, what grade school we went to, what some of our interests were with music and movies and TV. And there were a few other things that we had to address. And she was going to call us up alphabetically to give this 5-minute speech. Now, I have to say I was pretty nervous about it. I'm sure most of the students in the class were, but I was pretty nervous because I don't think I had ever gotten up in front of a class before. But my teacher, Mrs. Wortman, did tell all of us that the reason why she was doing it wasn't just so that we could get to know each other better, but also because she felt that public speaking represented a skill set that was extremely worthwhile to learn and practice. And so she wanted to start in that class. And so we went alphabetically, and my last name is Sherman, so I thankfully didn't have to go right away. But it turns out almost everybody in the class presented their 5-minute speech in really about the same way. They all of them had little 3x5 note cards, and they got up and they looked down at their cards, and then they just sort of ticked off all the things that they were asked to say to the class. And so I had a couple of days to think about what I wanted to do because my name I didn't have to go until I think of the 3rd day. And so then it was my turn, and I really didn't want to do a speech that was just like everybody else's. I didn't want to to just pull out a note card and read through it. Now, Mrs. Wortman did ask us to be she told us we could be as creative as possible. So I was thinking about that, and so when it was my turn to give my speech, I walked up to the front of the class, and I had a paper bag, and inside that paper bag, I had some props. Let's see, I had a cassette player, and I pulled that out, and I pulled out a bag of pennies. I pulled that out, and then I pulled out a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and so those were some of the props that I had. And so the first thing I did was I didn't say a word. I went over and I plugged my cassette player into the nearest wall outlet, and I pushed play. And the song Penny Lane by the Beatles started playing on the cassette player. And I then, as it was playing or as it started, I took my bag of pennies and I walked around and I gave everybody a penny in the class. Again, I didn't say anything, just Penny Lane is playing and I'm giving everybody a penny. And then I did that, and then I walked over and I turned the cassette player off and I introduced myself, and I said that was a song by the Beatles, who were at the time my favorite band. Actually, probably still is my favorite band, I suppose. And that I thought it went along well with with me handing out a penny. I also told the class that I had recently seen Ringo Starr, the drummer for the Beatles, in a small part on a sketch in the Monty Python show, and that was my favorite TV show at the time. I suppose in some ways it still is as well. But I really liked Ringo Starr from the Beatles. He was born on July 7th, which was only 2 days away from my birthday. And so, and also he was kind of the smaller of the Beatles, and I was always the smaller of the students in my class. So I appreciated that. There, I was being vulnerable with them. So after telling them a little bit about myself and that, I asked them to all look at their pennies and just to shout out what was the year that was on the pennies. And it took me a little while to prepare, but every single one of the students in the class that I can recall yelled out 1962. And I told them that was the year that I was born, probably the year that many of them were born, and that one of the reasons why I wanted to give them the penny is because at that time there was this kind of fad for some reason where the communicating about the similarities between Abraham Lincoln on the penny and John F. Kennedy, the president. The president in 1962 was where all these similarities between those two. For example, and I'll read a couple because I brought out this little card from the bag that again, it had a penny, and JFK was carved onto the front of the penny, and it was just this thing that was around during that time. And so I just read some things off the card, that both presidents were shot on a Friday and in the presence of their wives. And Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who told him not to go to Ford's Theater. And Kennedy had a secretary named Evelyn Lincoln, and she warned him not to go to Dallas. Both Oswald and Booth were killed before they were put on trial. So it was all these facts that were coincidences, but tried to make it look like there was some sort of cosmic connection between those two. But I did use that as an opportunity to say that both Lincoln and Kennedy were two of my favorite presidents, probably because they were two of my parents' favorite presidents. I grew up in a working class Catholic home, so it was no surprise that JFK was almost deified in my house growing up. So I got to tell them a little bit about me that way and my family life, and I got to talk a little bit about my favorite music and my favorite TV show. So I finished my presentation by pulling out from the bag the copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, and I got to tell my class that it was one of my favorite books, also one of my favorite movies. and that I had a connection to the movie. I always felt like I did, because when I was born in 1962, that's the year that the movie came out. And when I was born, I was premature by about 2 months, and so I came into this world without a name, and my parents didn't anticipate it happening like then. And so I went a couple of days without a name because my parents hadn't thought about it yet. Apparently, that's how the legend goes. But there was a story in the paper that To Kill a Mockingbird was that there was a movie made about it, and that it was going to be released on Christmas, and the movie was going to star Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch from the book. And so my dad decided that Gregory was a good name to name me, and that's how I got the name Gregory. So that's how I concluded my speech to the class, my personal speech to the class. And I have to say that Mrs. Wortman, she applauded me so loud, I remember, and she was absolutely so encouraging, and she communicated to the whole class that that was the kind of creativity she was hoping to kind of elicit in us as we moved through the year. So it was and it just made me feel so good moving forward in that class, and then also just gave me a lot more confidence in school in general. So, but the reason why that incident, why I think about it when I think about its influence on what style of teaching that I would have, it wasn't the creative part that really struck me later in life, but what really struck me was that Mrs. Wortman, who was our honors English class, she flat out told us that she wanted to give us an opportunity to practice public speaking because she felt that that was a skill set that was really worth learning and practicing, because it was a skill set that we were going to use in our life as we move forward a lot. And that one of the purposes of education was to help us really be successful at learning things that are worth learning. And that has been with me just honestly my whole life, and has been an inspiration. And so here I am presenting to you now kind of in a public speaking manner. And that's the story that I wanted to convey. And also I just wanted to say that so for this project, I'm just using my cell phone to make it easy to record. I'll push stop, and then I'll just upload this video to YouTube and embed it in the course website. And that's something that you can do when you work on this project as well. There are a lot of different ways to record video, but this is a simple and easy one. And I'll put some resources on the website that provide you with some support at being able to do this. And I hope to learn a little bit more about you in your stories as well. And I know that this went over 5 minutes for sure, but I'm sure that my story with my bag back when I was a sophomore in high school, I'm sure that went over 5 minutes as well. And I do want to end by, I got my yearbook here. Here's I will just show you a picture of, there's Mrs. Wortman, a woman who inspired me and probably had no idea that she was planting seeds for my teaching. But there you go.